What's up guys, this is Miasin, and today we're actually going to be going over the best decks of the current format, not a top 10, because we have 53 freaking decks in here, even more than last time, and next time I'm going to be making this, we're going to have even more decks, and I will be making this video again in a couple of weeks once we get crossover breakers, because this time we're going to have Raziel and Malice. So maybe those two decks, they might change the metagame a little bit more, not because, you know, they're obviously going to be in top tier or whatever, the best one, but also because they are going to be shaping the whole format around them. Because for example, when we have again very good mid-range decks around, then the combo decks become a little less good because the mid-range decks, they can play so many hand traps that combo deck they might struggle keeping up with the amount of hand traps that they can play, and therefore the format might turn into a mid-range format. Anyways, right now it's still the exact same. It's still a combo heavy format. It's the same shit that we've been having for like the past 2 years. Anyways, before we go any further, you already know the drill. Smash the like and subscribe button. And it is especially important today because it's your boy's birthday. So yes, thank you very much in advance. I really appreciate you. And also watch this video until the end because otherwise I will be roasting you. Okay, so first things first is Salamangreat. How good is that deck? It's actually not bad at all. It definitely isn't bad. It does have some lines into Nibiru. It can play a decent amount of hand traps. The worst fire deck that you can play, but it's still a fire deck because it abuses Princess in one of the coolest ways possible, because you can proactively trigger Princess and then give like the Weasel to your opponent, and then you revive back the Princess, and then you can make not the Raging Phoenix, but the other one that searches... Wait, hold on, it actually is Raging Phoenix. Oh, there we go. Raging Phoenix is like mega nasty in Salamangreat because it also searches. It's really nice to finally be able to play Salamangreat, like how like a bunch of Salamangreat cards they're played in like fire decks in general, but in Salamangreat it's even better. So yeah, it's a good deck, but I can't really put it in like these tiers or anything. But it definitely is one of the better rogue decks out there. The plan deck, I would be lying if I put it like around here, because it does have to like also be afraid of like the Molchemies and stuff. Obviously in the hands of Jessica Robinson or Julius, this deck is mega goated, but in the hands of like an average human being, maybe it's not that great. And also if people actually know how to hand trap this deck is way worse. But again, I mean, I got treated to the Europe special when I lost to this deck at top 4 at YCS, so obviously this deck is very goated. Okay, Chimera Fiendsmith is also a very good meta contender. It's a remarkable deck. It was actually one of the top 5 most played decks at YCS Lille, which was pretty much the same format, I think, as the one that we have right now. Actually, no, because that was before Rage of the Abyss, which introduced Molchemi Foros. So now maybe the deck is a little worse. I think this deck does lose very hard to Foros, and it also still loses to Shifter and stuff like that. And the deck does have some consistency issues, although the Fiendsmith engine can bridge into your engine, which is really nice, so you can kind of compensate for the loss of consistency. I think this deck is really good. I do believe in it. I do think that it is a nice option that is just going to keep getting better and better over time, because this is still kind of like the debut of the illusion type, but as time goes by, we're going to have even more cards that can just search illusion monsters. Maybe we're going to have like a field spell that searches any illusion or a chimera card from your deck to your hand on activation or whatever. So I think this deck is going to be a great long-term investment. So keep an eye out on this deck. I think it's just overall nice. The Vanquish Soul deck is not great. It plays Shifter, and it's very good into mid-range decks. So maybe it's going to get even better over time, just because I think hand traps are useless against Vanquish Soul. Most of them don't even hurt you. Some of them are like neg ones, actually. Like, what are you going to do? Veiler a Ryzen? Okay, chain a Heavy Burger. And then your Veiler is basically a hand loop yourself for one. Nibiru does nothing. Shifter obviously does nothing. The Molchemi cards are useless. Maybe Perolia is actually decent, but Furos does absolutely nothing. So this deck, I guess it's not really like the ceiling level that is high, but rather your opponent's cards are bad against yours. So there is a few like good reasons to play Vanquish Soul, but I wouldn't necessarily call like this deck a good deck just because of that. Magical Musketeer Unchained Fiendsmith deck. Very, very good deck. Maybe if you actually play like super well, super competitively, it might be top tier, but I kind of beg to differ, because I have looked at the list from, I believe, Remote Duel YCS, like 3rd or 4th place. Really cool list, and huge shoutouts to the guy who did well with it. My only issue is that you kind of have like a lack of space for non-engine cards, so I'm a little concerned with the go second against the combo decks, because I think that might be a little problem. But apart from that, I think that the deck is really cool. I mean, you're also going to be catching a lot of players off guard. They don't even know how to interact with your deck. I don't know if the deck still plays like Link into the Vrains, but that card breaks boards like there is absolutely no tomorrow. If you resolve that card, it's basically Exodia. So yeah, that's really nice. And this deck, I think, is just overall really nice. The Rescuers deck, is either at the very bottom of top tier or somewhere like at the very top of solid contender, just because again, it is still a fire deck, it is still very competitive, and I think it is very good into Molchemy 4-0s because if you can just give like your opponent 1 or maximum 2 draws and then you resolve Turbulence, there is pretty much no way you lose. The issues again with this deck is you gotta dedicate a lot of cards in your deck to like the engine, so not a lot of space for hand traps, board breakers, etc. So I think going second might be a little problematic, and you also have to place several bricks in your deck because obviously all the spells and traps that you set with Turbulence, so that is also a little frustrating. The hero deck is not good at the current moment, but it's about to be very good with, I mean, maybe not like very good, but it's about to definitely get a nice boost off of the new support from Supreme Darkness. Unchained is just another one of those rogue decks, but it's also about to be much better. And also you can play Unchained Fiendsmith, it definitely isn't bad, so that's the reason why it still has to be here. And I guess it's gonna be getting Abaoshu and stuff like that in Supreme Darkness, so that's really cool. Despia, I do not think is like the greatest meta call at the current moment, but Bestials are not really seeing play, but all you really have for you would be the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare Lock, and that's about it. Maybe into Raziel format, it could be good, because their ceiling is like super low, so you can kind of benefit off of that. But also because of the existence of Raziel, Dimensional Barrier is going to be absolutely everywhere, and that card wipes the floor with the Despia. So I don't know if this is like the best long-term investment, but whatever. And also I think going second against Malice is going to be really tough, and Malice can play billions of Bestials and billions of hand traps that might just make this deck unplayable. So I'm not sure. And also Dominus Impulse was like the main reason why this deck completely fell off the metagame. But again, because of the existence of Raziel, Dominus Impulse will be less good, which means that this deck might get better. So just keep that in mind. Fire King Snake Eyes is clearly a top tier deck, and as a matter of fact, you can actually play this deck without Snake Eye Ash, without Flambridge, whatever, without those cards, and you're still very good, because the Fire King cards overall, you can literally just play pure Fire King's budget, and it is a remarkable deck. I really do believe in it. Ritual Beast, another top tier deck. This is the one shifter deck that is extremely skillful. It has so many different lines. It's just an overall very good deck at going first and second, even because you can play a lot of board breakers. And your board breakers are also really cool because Book of Eclipse can also be used going first in order to mitigate the impact of Nibiru, because you're flipping everything face down. Nibiru only tributes face up monsters, and then you can use your face down monsters to still contact fuse and keep playing from there. So yeah, this deck is really cool. And then the Mimigul deck is definitely a rogue deck, but it is a good rogue deck. It's really hard to, I mean, like master and deck build because there's so many weird things that you can do. And it's kind of like a really slow control-esque style that is just not really my type, but if you enjoy those kinds of decks, then good for you. And it is the kind of deck where you are forcing your opponent to play into your triple tactic talent and thrust, and also your Kashtira Unicorn and stuff like that. So the Kashtira engine is great in Mimigul, and if you don't get hit by Dominus Impulse, you're good, but if you do get negated by Dominus Impulse, you lose the game on the spot because you can't use the Mimigul monster effects that you give to your opponent anymore for the rest of the duel, which is terrible. Battle Wasp, I don't think is great at the current moment. Nobody's really playing it, but it's actually not a garbage deck, but it loses to every single Molchemy monster, and the combo that you can do in this deck basically is Turbo out, I think it's like something Moth. That card is basically El Shuttle Winda, and you can also search like a counter trap that negates monster effects and stuff like that. It is a cool deck, but again, it really, really hard loses to the Molchemies. But yeah, very nice, and also everybody's gonna hand trap you wrong. And like one of the main monsters in this deck, it's kind of like the Blackwing Simoon in the Blackwing deck. It gets you like the Black Whirlwind that searches a bunch of monsters. It's really freaking fantastic. Shark is also a rogue deck. It's a little simplistic. It's about to get a little better with a new Shark monster, which is nice again, but I would still have to put it here. Melodious is also a rogue deck because even though it's very good into hand traps, it's very bad into board breakers. It plays maybe like 15, 16 non-engine cards in 40, which is great. And it plays a decent amount of starters, but Prada Prosperity got limited, so the deck is a little less consistent. And sometimes you might have to rely on like your shaky starters that still lose really hard to hand traps. Like if you have to rely on the Link 2 in order to get your stuff going, that loses to Veiler, Ogre, Ash, Imperm, Dominus Impulse, etc. So that's a little frustrating, unfortunately. The Orcus deck is not worth playing at the current moment, but again, very good investment in the future because the new Link 1 and the new Link 4, remarkable cards. I can't complain. Generator is not good, absolutely not good. Memento is also a top tier deck, very, very good deck, My issue with Memento is that, first of all, it's very complicated to play. The deck has infinite lines. And also, the main problem is that going second, you might struggle a little bit against hardcore combo decks, just because you can't play enough hand traps. Like, you can play maybe 12 hand traps in 42 cards. That's what I was able to figure out. But I think it's really hard to do any more in, like, less cards even, just because you need a lot of cards, like, you need a lot of engine cards in order to make this deck consistent and be able to play through hand traps. So going first, I think this deck is actually better than Fire King Snake Eyes. I think the end board is, like, ridiculously good. But again, going second against combo decks only is going to be a really big struggle. But against mid-range decks, this deck is insane. So against the Raziel deck, this deck actually has a chance going second, just because you don't need like that many hand traps or that many board breakers, and then you can start naturally playing through a lot of the hand traps that your opponent has. So this deck is in a very good spot next format. But right now, I think it can just sit comfortably here. Not to mention that, yet again, this deck is very convoluted, which means that, again, you are prone to misplaying, but your opponent is also prone to misplaying against you, and you can capitalize off of that. The White Forest deck, White Forest Runic or whatever, this deck is always going into time, which really pisses me off. If you don't mind this, then sure, but if you're the kind of player that already plays slow, you're gonna have so many draws with this, and depending on the environment that you're in, maybe a draw is basically a loss, and you can't afford that. So I really don't like this deck just because of how slow it is, and also you don't play hand traps, so you're likely to get FTK'd and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm just also not a big fan. And also Cosmic Cyclone is gaining a lot in popularity because of the prominence of Fire King and the fact that it basically behaves as an interruption and also as a board breaker. And Cosmic Cyclone is great against White Forest Runic, whereas before, Cosmic Cyclone was not in everyone's side deck. Now it's getting more popular and popular. Kashtira is also another rogue deck. It can play Shifter, but it loses to like Tenpai Dragon in like 2 seconds because Regeki wipes the floor with you, Darkhold, and your deck doesn't make Omni Negates, so it definitely is beatable. And if you are playing against another Shifter deck, you're always playing the worst deck every single time. And I really don't like this. This deck is very reactive. It's really shit. I don't like Kashtira at all. Exodia, you would be shocked to hear that I actually think that this deck is not too bad. I think this deck is kind of like the cheap Electric Boogaloo version. I probably butchered that, but the cheap version of Tenpai. So it is very similar. It's just that if you win the dice roll, you can choose to go first, obviously, and then you set up your fusion, you get your Exodo, Rage, whatever, you destroy everything on your opponent's turn. You can still play Shifter, you can still play some hand traps or some board breakers, and it's nice. It's very simplistic, very minimalistic. You can't do that much. Even like when you go first, all you can really do is like Rabbit, set your Azaroon or your other Silhouette Trap or whatever, and then that's all you really have with the fusion and some hand traps. It's not that much, but the deck is cool at just OTKing very easily as long as you don't pay too many life points. And also this deck either wins or loses at the speed of light, so you're never gonna have a migraine playing this deck. I strongly recommend if you're like a new player or something. I will also be making a video on all the best budget decks out there, and also the best decks for new players. But I think Exodia is in a very, very good position if you haven't played in a while. And also, this deck is actually keeping is actually topping a few YCSs now. So it really just proves that it really doesn't suck. And I know I'm saying Exodia and I'm pointing to like a Blue Eyes monster, but that is the Exodia Blue Eyes. So yeah. Just keep that in mind. Sorry, that is 6 Samurai. Nah, I really tried my best to make this deck work. It unfortunately doesn't at the current moment. I can't even put in Rogue, unfortunately. It doesn't, like, fully suck, but it's rough going second. It's against, like, it's not favorable for you, and sometimes you can just randomly break because you don't draw, like, the correct combination of cards. I guess the deck was, like, stronger when it had, like, the equip spells and Isolde and stuff like that, but it also didn't really feel like a real deck. It was basically just a warrior deck with 6 Samurai cards. Now it's like an actual 6 Samurai deck, so it feels very clean. But unless we get like Gateway of the 6 back to 3, I can't really see this deck really being on the map again. Gimmick Puppet is definitely somewhere in the rogue section. It's a good deck, again. But then again, it still loses a little bit hard to hand traps, and like the 1-card combos, they don't really work anymore. I mean, the field spell is still an FTK, I believe. But the 2-card combos, they're just whack unless you have like Metal Tronius or like some specific cards very specifically with like little soldiers and stuff like that. I think the deck is going to be getting drastically better once we get Maze of the Master, because that is introducing the Fiendish Knight, something like that. And that card does create some 2-card FTKs for Gimmick Puppet, post the limitation of Gimmick Puppet of Strings and Dark Strings. Dark Strings was like the really annoying one. Gimmick Puppet of Strings, I think, was not the end of the world. Or like the other way around, I forgot. Nah, I'm pretty sure it's like Dark Strings that pissed me off. Anyways, the Yugi deck, no, yeah. It's actually funny how the Grandpa deck is better than the Kid Yugi deck now. Things have changed. Well, not really. I think that deck was always kind of better, even without Blue Eyes of the Heart. Anyways, Madolche is maybe at the very bottom of Rogue. It can play a couple of hand shops. It is very hard to stop, actually, if it goes first, but it doesn't really make an unbreakable board. It's just that it... Like, your hand shops are gonna be doing nothing unless it's like Nibiru, and they're never gonna be making like an insane board. It's just gonna be like the Chop card, Promenade, and like the Glass Souffle that can shuffle back cards. They can loop their hand shops over and over, and the deck is solid going second. But again, it's another like super simplistic deck that can't really play like, I don't know, like the best, like or the most amount of non-engine cards out there. And also like hand shops, they kind of conflict with the strategy because now you're gonna have a card in your grave and it's just gonna be whack. Purely is a deck that really loses when there is way too many hand shops running around, so I think that this deck is not in a good meta call. I mean, in a good position. It's not gonna be a good meta call in the future, but it's actually not bad. Maybe here, I don't know, maybe. I'm not 100% sure. The Metal Morph deck, I guess with Primite and stuff like that, or I guess Metal Morph Dragon Link, again, not complete garbage, but that engine I think is like kind of copium. You don't really need it in anything. If you're playing it, then you're also kind of fine if you're not playing it. Blackwing. Oh my god, I feel like I'm about to die. Nah, where can I put this? I mean, I haven't seen like a Kanak video in a while. My bad if you're watching this. Huge shoutouts to you, by the way. You're the GOAT. But Blackwing is a cute deck, I guess. Yeah, I don't really know if it has like an edge over anything at the current moment. Lunalight, even though Tiger is now, I think, a 2 or something. I don't believe in that. I don't know. It's probably there. Well, I don't know. Raid Raptor. I love this deck so much, but it's probably at the very bottom of Rogue. It just has issues, man. Going second is rough. Very, very rough. And yeah, sure, you can play like maybe 12 non-engine in your deck and 40 cards. But then like Imperm, Veiler, Mourner, Ogre, all those cards are really rough against the deck. But I guess Ash you can still play through. It's less annoying than the other cards that I just mentioned. And Nibiru and Droll are not good against you. But then Furos actually wipes the floor with you. Even Perulia is actually kind of solid. You give your opponent like multiple draws, and there are still some decks that can actually beat the Raid Raptor board, but not that many. So if you can full combo, then you're chilling, you know. Okay, Phantom Knight. That deck is actually it's not chic. So you can play a lot of cute engines in it and make it work. Reminds me a lot of like Orchest, where you play a lot of like bricks, but I don't know. It's I guess if you know how to deck build really well, this deck it's cute. I mean, it can actually beat like multiple hand shops if you have the Brave Token engine and the Horse engine. You can beat like Nib Imperm because you can make Wandering Griffin Rider with the Photon Lord in like 5 summons, and then your opponent can't even beat you. It's actually kind of cool. I do like this in the Phantom Knight deck. I do think it has potential maybe in the future, but right now there's no new support, so I wouldn't really look into that deck at the current moment. Yubel, clearly one of the best decks. I would actually say that Yubel is better than Fire King Snake Eyes, even though most players are playing this over Yubel. I think Yubel is better into hand shops than this deck, and they play like the same amount of bricks, but Yubel plays like slightly more hand shops just because this deck needs so many engine cards. You need like billions of Fire King cards, and most of them are like kind of bad to draw. Kirin is fine, Ulcanix is great, and then, you know, for the Snake Eye cards, whatever, like most of them are bricks, but then you have Bonfire and Snake Eye Ash. And then you can also draw some Garnets, like the Populace. When you also draw Snake Eye Ash, you can draw like the OG Garunix, which is shit. In Yubel, you don't really have Garnets, you just have like Takatumborgs. Like if you draw them, you know, they're neg ones in your hand, but they don't make your combo worse. In Fire King, they actually do make your combo worse. This deck also loses a little harder to like Retallying Sea and stuff like that, and it kind of plays very hard into like Perulia, but you can argue Yubel also loses to Perulia. This deck is better into Furos though, and Yubel is terrible into Furos, unless like they shotgun the Furos and then you just go, okay, normal Dark Beckoning Beast, make like a small Unchained board, and then pass turn there. That's not too bad. And against Shifter, I think both of these decks get shafted by Shifter. But post-game 1, I think there are cool strategies that you can do in both decks. So for example, in this deck, there's the Mannequin Cat combo where you revive back your opponent's Shifter and then you summon Chaos Hunter. And in the Fire King deck, you can make Hikinagashi Fucho, and you could also technically do it on game 1 if you main deck Fucho. Definitely a possibility. Some people are doing that, by the way, so it is relevant. Marincess is a rogue deck. I mean, it can play a decent amount of hand shops. I believe in it. It's comparable to like Melodious, but maybe slightly worse, just because you gotta go into like more steps in order to get your combo going. and you play like a lot of one-card starters, but most of them, they don't really do like that much. Like Blue Tang obviously has the potential of doing like the nuts, but the deck's not like super explosive. It's more of like a mid-range deck that is very fair, similar to like Tenyi Sword Soul, I guess you can say. The Spright deck is remarkable, very, very, very good. If anything, you know what? I might actually put it at the very bottom of Solid Contender. I don't really care too much where, like, when you see a deck at the very bottom of something or like at the very top of like another section, to me, like those positions are interchangeable, so I don't really care too much. But Spright, I really do believe in it. I think it's a great deck. I think it has ways of beating every single Mochami. It doesn't lose to Shifter too much. It has a lot going for it. It doesn't lose to handshops too much, so I think in the Raziel format, it's also in a great position because people are going to be playing handshops against you. And then as a Spright player, you can even play like a board breaker version of the Spright deck that can work. So there's a lot of... this deck is really good at adapting itself to the situation. And I think into Raziel format, Spright is going to be great because you can go Gigantic, summon Ibli, give Ibli to your opponent, and Raziel, they cannot out Ibli. It's Forbidden, Droplet, or Bust. That's it, that's all. There's no other out. Or I guess, I mean, no, yeah, they can't even like special summon X to send Aggregator. It really hurts a lot. It's absolutely terrifying. So yeah, Spright, very cool deck. Again, it's just good at adapting itself to anything. But I wouldn't main deck the Ibli combo because if you try to Ibli lock the the Malice deck, you're gonna sound like, you're gonna look so freaking stupid. Okay, Eldritch, that deck is always gonna be slightly worse than Labyrinth, but I still think it's a great trap deck. It has a lot going for it. Maybe if it's like here it makes sense. I'm not 100% sure. It's like I said, it's very similar to Labyrinth, but it has a worse grind game because your resources, you will eventually run out of gas because you're always using like resources from your deck or your graveyard and then they get banished. Whereas Labyrinth, you're recycling back from the graveyard over and over and over. So yeah, Labyrinth I think is a little better. And speaking of which, I will put that deck maybe around here-ish. Yeah, so it's a solid meta contender, but it's not in top tier. Actually, hold on a second. No, actually, to be fair, it is the best solid contender here. It is better than Exodia. So yeah, I do have to put some respect on Labyrinth. It's the best trap deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! At the current moment. Okay, Runic Stun is a very bullshitty deck, but I do think that the White Forest Runic deck is better than Runic Stun. Actually, you know what? If anything, this deck is actually the worst deck of solid contender. Just because, again, Cosmic Cyclone is gaining popularity and your Floodgates now are pretty much all at one. Okay, Lightsworn. That deck is more or less real, but it's also not shit. So I will probably have to put it here, like maybe below Purely. But it doesn't really play like a lot of good going second cards, so actually no, you might have a downgrade and a half. Maybe here. I'm not 100% sure. The Fiendsmith Engine is cool in the deck because you can also search Vice, this card right here. And you can do some cute things. You can Protoss your opponent, etc. Blah, blah, blah. Not too bad. Phantasmal Spiral. Very annoying to win games with this deck. It takes like 10 years to win, and it takes like 2 seconds to lose. So that's kind of sus, but whatever. It's still a relatively acceptable deck. Tier, I absolutely do not believe in Tier. As a matter of fact, I actually think Marincess is better just because this deck... Bro, it's Lottery Turbo, super RNG, you play so many bricks, it loses to like every single handshop imaginable now. It's really sad, you can't play handshops yourself, so going second, you're always freaking crying. Nah, just nah. But to be fair, when you're popping off, you're popping off. So you know what, if anything, you can argue that it's like interchangeable with Lightsworn. Maybe this deck, or both of these decks deserve a boost. I didn't even do anything in theory, I just literally moved down Blackwing, that's it. Okay, moving forward, we have Snake Eye Azamina White Forest. This deck, no, sorry, Snake Eye Azamina Feedsmith, potentially, if you want to play the Feedsmith engine. I hate the Fiendsmith engine in the deck because it means that Dominus Impulse is actually kind of sus. And Dominus Impulse is like the main reason why you're trying to play this deck. It's because you're trying to play so many handshops. But if you don't play the Fiendsmith engine, then you can't really make like a super unbreakable board. I don't know. I don't like this deck. Please just play Fire King Snake Eyes over it. Even Memento, I think, is better than this. This, even though it can play a lot of handshops, I just think it's a fake deck. Please don't play it. Centurion is very comparable to Ritual Beast, but I actually think it's worse just because this deck is more simple to counter. So your opponent has like a higher chance of just using his handshops correctly and just beating you, whereas Ritual Beast, your opponent can misplay against you. And also Centurion going second, it doesn't have a lot of layers of push, whereas Ritual Beast, I actually do think that you can naturally win going second, even without like handshops sometimes. but you do play board breakers. In Centurion, it's really just your board breakers and your engine shit going second. This deck can lose to like one Cosmic Cyclone going second. So I really don't like Centurion, but I definitely have to respect it. I think I would be lying if I put Centurion anywhere below top tier section. Okay, now we have Infernoid, which is the best deck in the cheek section because it can't really play hand traps. And by the way, this is coming from a die-hard Infernoid fan. I love this deck from the bottom of my heart, so it really pains me to put this deck in the cheek section. Flunderies, actually, you know what? You can burn in hell. Realistically, this deck doesn't belong here, but you know what? Just to piss off every single bird player out there, I will be putting it at the very bottom. If you play Flunderies, unfriend me now. Thunder Dragon, I don't even know why this deck is here. I don't even think a single human being has even tried to play this deck ever since Colossus was unbanned, and now that it's a 2, I still am not seeing anyone play it. And I feel like if it goes to 3, I still won't see anyone play it. This deck is actually like a mythical copium deck. I swear to God. Sword Soul Tenyi, also kind of copium, but to be fair, it is like better than Marincess maybe. It's not garbage. Okay, Tenpai is absolutely the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. So I don't know if you guys know my boy Mario, but bro, he's been on freaking fire lately. Like he got 3rd place at Lille, 4th at Niagara, and he just won the Remote Duel YCS. So that is a back-to-back top 4 at a YCS with the exact same deck, Tenpai Motherfreaking Dragon. This deck is unfair if it is played correctly. I feel like Tenpai Dragon has a very bad reputation because usually they say, oh, this deck is played by the bad players, etc. Yo, you give a good player the Tenpai deck, and the deck is unfair just because, yo, the deck is simplistic. All you have to do is just know where to hand trap your opponent, and that's it, that's all. Merry Christmas, you win. Your deck is just a bunch of one-card combos. You only play one brick in it, which is Fadra. Everything else is like a productive card that either helps you or hurts the opponent. So yeah, this deck is just as good as how you deck build it and how you know how to interact your opponents with, and I think it's good. I think if it really rewards players for being like really well prepared for events, because if you don't have a game plan for going first, obviously you're gonna get punished. But if you do know exactly what to do when you go first, when you know like how to make Hieratic Seal and then bounce back your own cards and then chain Mochimi Foro so that even when you go first, you can interrupt your opponent and still Mochimi your opponent, that is really nasty. But yeah, I absolutely believe that Tenpai Dragon, if anything, is actually truly a tier 0 deck. And I really mean this. I'm not saying this for like the clickbait and stuff like that. I really do mean it. Okay, Ice Bearer is like actual dog shit. I don't even know where to put it, but I don't care. Mermail is, yo, not too bad. It is actually, if anything, maybe better than Exodia, now that I've seen like some results with it. And I'm not saying this just because, oh, I can recognize that people are not too bad with it. The deck does have some nice lines going second. It doesn't lose to hand traps for the most part, but it does lose very, very hard to like Drool, Shifter, Furoros, and a little bit to Parolia. Actually, a lot to Parolia, never mind. But you can still do like some nice, relatively okay-ish boards into Parolia. Furoros, I really don't think you can, like, at all. Because if you're trying to hand loop your opponent, then you're giving your opponent so many draws that it actually ends up backfiring on you. So yeah, that's kind of unfortunate. But this deck does have some flaws, obviously, so that's the reason why it cannot be perfect. And if people actually knew how to hand trap this deck correctly, it would be like below here, unfortunately. But again, it does prey on people's ignorance extremely well, just like the Memento deck and Ritual Beast deck does. Anyways, Drytron is... it's not bad. It's actually not bad. I have seen a really cool American player do very well at YCS Cancun with this deck. Huge shouts to you if you're watching this. So I do believe that Drytron in the right hands could do some really cool things. Maybe I'm gonna put it here or something. I don't know. It's a rogue deck, clearly. It's not like a top tier meta deck. But rogue doesn't mean garbage, right? Just keep that in mind. The only thing that means garbage would be these decks right here. Especially this piece of shit. Oh, okay, Cyber Dragon. Yeah, it's the best deck. It's the best deck. It's the best deck. There you go. It's obviously the best deck because I say so. Goblin Biker is like really bad right now, but it's about to get a little better once we get to the new support. Hold on a second. No, actually, it's because of the existence of Raziel. Now you can just keep summoning your monsters by detaching your opponent's materials. That's actually kind of cool. So that allows you to have some extra pushes, so the deck doesn't become like super normal summon dependent, which was the thing that pissed me off the most with Raziel. So now you can naturally break boards, which is cool and all, but it still has like a lot of flaws actually. And it loses very hard to Parolia, and a little bit to Furos, and by a little bit I mean a decent amount, but it doesn't lose too hard to Shifter, ironically. And finally, we have Voices Voice, which is also, by the way, getting much better in next format. So I think it is the absolute worst solid contender deck there is out there. It is not a rogue deck. I think it is a little better than the rogue status. As a matter of fact, even the Spright deck might be like better. The Spright deck, you can, I guess, say, oh, might as well be here. This deck is gonna get better because, like, decks are gonna be getting a little slower next format because of the existence of Raziel, yet again. Which is, again, exactly what Voices Voice needed, because I don't think that this deck has the power level to, like, keep up with all the combo decks out there. I've seen some really nice players try some cool things with Voices Voice, and I do think that, you know, there is potential, but I don't think that right now is the current moment to experiment with this deck. And so I think next format, you could play even Voices Voice Raziel. That's really nice, so you have multiple layers of push. And if you get D-Bird for Ritual, then you still have your small Raziel engine that can help you do some cool things. So yeah, Voices Voice is a cool deck with a lot of nice future ahead of it. But yeah, that's about it for this best decks video. You guys let me know how you feel about it, and if you disagree with anything, then you are more than welcome to complain to my boss. And I do not have a boss, so in other words, that means yeah, get out of here. And yeah, I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.